So, let me revisit each of these. Some of you I've shared this with before. I'm going to invoke the single example that changed my mind about the nature of how I think had to do with my daughter, Alina. When she was in kindergarten, she was in tears one day and was sitting around the dinner table, and I asked her what happened at school, and she said the teacher did not like my answer to her question. Now, she's a kindergartner, she was learning the alphabet, and I'm going to pose the question to you that my daughter was asked. Which of these letters is the most out of place? Just look at it for a moment. Show of hands, anybody say the B is the letter that's the most out of place? The C? Okay. The C, it has no stem, it's facing the other direction, and so on. How about the D? Anyone say the D is the letter that's the most out of place? How about the P? Most of you who are engineers, I would suspect would go for the P, perhaps not. To jump to the conclusion, her teacher drew an X over the P and wrote the letter E in, because being from the Western world and not Chinese, of course you read from the top left and left to right and top to bottom. But then she had done one of those little frowny faces. So I said to my daughter, no wonder you're in tears. The teacher had no right to humiliate you like that. And she said, no, Dad, I just thought my answer was better than the teacher's. I said, well, which of these letters to you is the most out of place? And she said, the T. Let me double check. How many of you can see the T? See it? All right. Oftentimes, as I listen to all the speakers, I believe in my heart that that's what we're all looking for. Where is the T? Where is the thing that's right in front of us that's so simple and so obvious and so unencumbered that we can actually do something with it? And so all those who think differently make no assumptions, as my daughter didn't. She didn't take for granted the normal way of understanding the alphabet, how you learn to read, etc., etc. So that's the first point. The second point that I want to make about all those that I've known to be able to think outside of the box, and that is that they understand that you have to seek out the anomalies and the exceptions and track them and monitor them and be aware of them and don't reject them prematurely in order to eventually connect all the dots, not just the safe dots. So, for example, let me revert to history. Some of you may be aware of this, but we probably all were exposed to the Persian and Arabian writings of the 1001 Arabian Nights. Well, in ancient areas of the Middle East, when they looked at the night sky, they, like myself, since I was a small child, rejected learning the constellations because they did not want to see the same patterns every night in the night sky. And so the themes for the 1001 stories came from the darkness in the sky that informed them, because it took different shapes depending on what you looked at, and the clouds and the weathers and so on. And so there was an infinite amount of creativity and innovation if you didn't always look at the same old dots. Thirdly, they always ask questions. And here's where the Apple Think Different campaign came into my mind that Linda showed in her opening remarks. If you look at all these faces of all those who have had their 15 minutes of fame as different thinkers, I think that they asked questions. Each and every one of them were astute at asking questions early on. So, in my feeble attempt to think differently, I have put together 7 questions I would ask of you. Again, because I get to do this as the one of perhaps 2 or 3 people in this room who are not BAE employees, but rather I work with you every chance I can. So the first question I would ask you is, when you connect the dots, what business are you really in? I don't expect answers from you right now. I'm just going to go through these questions. Secondly, what other business are you in beside the business you think you're really in? Linda alluded in her opening remarks that Apple is not just a computer business, but they are now in a much broader field of communication, and others have described it in a variety of other ways. But what other business are you in? Thirdly, what are your core competencies? And I don't mean this in the sense of just some skills that you have, but in the more classic business school definition of core competencies in its original form, a core competency was something that gave you a competitive advantage over everybody else in your sector. It's not just a skill that you're pretty good at. It's what are you genuinely ahead of the curve and ahead of everybody else in. And then how do you exploit that? And in some cases, again, it's not obvious. For example, you may not think of a core competency of yours being, I'm going to make one up, merger and acquisition. Most people don't even think of that as a competency. They just do it as part of a growth strategy. But perhaps you know how to do that fairly well, even better than anybody else in the industry. So what is it that you do have a core competency in, and do you exercise it frequently enough to continue to have a competitive advantage? Fourth, what are your core values? And do your policies and procedures reflect your core values? It's all well and good to say that you want to be trusted, innovative, and bold, but how does that transfer to the way you hire people and find people and retain people and train them? And how does that transfer to the area where, for example, as Chris Anderson mentioned, are you able as a company to find that 19-year-old whiz kid in Tijuana and hire him? Fifth, what competitor might become your next partner? Sixth, are your short-term actions and your long-term strategies in alignment? And lastly, do your answers to the first 6 of these questions complement or in fact negate each other? Because if you don't have a consistency in the way you are approaching all of those core questions, it's going to be difficult for you to manifest the answers in a way that's going to be viable and strategic and, of course, eventually profitable. Now, Linda, in my experience with her, is very good at asking questions, tough questions, and I believe she took a bold step in creating an opportunity in the last couple of days in a conference like this, her first occasion in her new role in front of all of you, to vary and venture from the path that you'd taken before in somewhat similar conferences. And so I wanted to acknowledge that, and I also want to let you know that I am done now with my concluding remarks, and that I want you to hear what Linda has to say by way of her reflections over the last couple of days. Thank you.